Hello, this is David and welcome to the Top 10 Worst JRPG Dungeons PlayStation 2 Edition. I was just starting college when the PlayStation 2 came out, and the system has some of the best RPGs in existence, sporting a massive library of great games with a breadth and depth that we really haven't seen since. However, with that sprawling library comes a price. There's gotta be some awful dungeons among them, but as usual, I'm only going to cover mandatory dungeons here. No post-game or bonus dungeons will be in this video. So, without further ado, let's get started. Number 10, Final Fantasy X, Bevelle Cloister of Trials. Seriously, people, I could put down any Cloister of Trial dungeon here and go on about how bad it is. They're boring, tedious time sinks that just take the momentum right out of the game. It's almost like the game was designed by two different teams. One whose focus was to put you on a long, narrow hallway towards the end, and another team who sought to bring the game and story to a standstill. The Cloister in Bevelle takes the cake. The oh-so-fun puzzle mechanic here has you grab spheres and take them on a conveyor belt maze filled with hairpin turns that you need razor-sharp reflexes or just dumb luck to pull off correctly. Miss a turn? You get to fall off and start over. Bring the wrong sphere? Be prepared to start over. Talk about a killjoy. Number 9, Shadow Hearts from the New World, Uwani Salt Lake. It's called a lake, but it's really more of a salt pillar tower, and in order to reach the top, you have to raise and lower platforms by hitting the appropriate crystals. Sounds simple enough, right? Wrong. They could not have made this place more complex. If you just try to go straight for the exit, you'll reach a locked door, so you have to hit crystals to find the switches to open the said doors, then go back and hit the crystals again just to get to the exit. And if you want the treasure here, get ready to do it even more. Many times as you're raising and lowering the pillars, they actually end up blocking your way, or certain crystals can only be accessed from a particular elevation, making you enter and exit the rooms and take alternate paths multiple times just to be able to proceed normally. To make matters worse, many times the crystals are located on pillars themselves as well, so if you mistakenly press them to go up, you can't just unpress them. You have to start all over again, circling back multiple times. The place is maddening. Number 8, Dark Cloud, Wise Owl Forest. I hate randomly generated dungeons. They give me no real incentive to explore. I just want to finish the floor as soon as possible and move on. Thankfully, this early 2000s fad seems to have fallen to the wayside nowadays, but back then, we still had to suffer with it. And as far as I'm concerned, this was easily the worst one. First of all, it has 17 floors of randomly generated fun, and unlike all the other dungeons, there are 3 possible keys to gather on each of the floors to proceed. But you won't know which one will work until you go to the owl to see if he'll accept it. So we have random keys in addition to random dungeons. Also, you get a new party member in here, Goro, the slow, dumpy cow, and you have to use him to clear one of the floors as well as to beat the boss. Many of the enemies here throw projectiles and run away from you, which makes it very frustrating to use him since he's a stereotypical strong, slow character. Only, he's not all that strong since you literally just got him. The place drags on and on as just a recipe for disaster. Number 7, Valkyr Profile 2, Ravine Caverns. Timer dungeons are always bad. They pretty much require either copious amounts of planning and map making beforehand, or, if you're without a guide of some kind, trial and error. Error meaning game over. My first timer dungeon was probably the Sky Tower from Breath of Fire 2, and that wasn't too bad though. There were ways to refresh the timer, and if it went down to 0, you just started over. Not in the Ravine Caverns, however. You only have 7 minutes to clear this diabolical maze, and to top it all off, it's dark, and the exits are difficult to see, and it's filled with poisonous swamps. Also, did I mention that many of the paths are one way? Because the time limit is so short, it's pretty much impossible to explore this place in one go, so you're gonna have to come back to this hellhole to find all the treasure once you clear it. Tri-Ace really knows how to make great dungeons, don't they? Let's look at another one of their gems. Number 6, Star Ocean 3, Firewall. It was a toss-up between here and the Ursa lava caves, but while the lava caves are just a maze with traps and hard enemies, the Firewall is all that and more. This place is full of long, narrow hallways filled with teleporters that loop you around, rolling polyhedrons that chase you and return you to the start if they hit you, and switches to activate one-way doors. Tackling all these things separately isn't so bad, but when you combine them all together, you have the makings for a pretty terrible dungeon. Also, there's not a single scrap of treasure. You're not even rewarded for the time that you spend wandering around hopelessly lost. Because the paths are so narrow, there will be times that you'll just have to stand around and wait, and wait, and wait for the polyhedrons to pass. Many times there's going to be 2 of them on the path that will box you in, and there's nothing that you can do about it but get hit and start the whole room over again. Once you finally pass the place, you're dropped off directly into the final dungeon, and if you're not prepared for it, have fun going backwards through the Firewall to buy more items and level up. Number 5, Tales of Legendia, The Waterways. Yeah, this game has some pretty awful dungeons, and it was hard for me to narrow it down to the one that I hated the most. And to top it all off, you have to pass through all of these terrible dungeons twice. It should be called Tales of Backtracking and Inexplicable Loss of Voice Acting. But that's a story for another time. The Forest of No Return is a horrendous maze, but you can easily skip it if you want to, so I'm not going to include it here, and the Wings of Light is just long. Nothing too bad about that. The Waterways, though? Yeah. It's a sewer dungeon, our favorite! What else could be said about these dungeons that I haven't already said? There's switches, raising and lowering water levels, and long, empty hallways that all look the same so you can get incredibly lost very easily. Not to mention that you have to go through it twice! When will developers ever learn that everyone hates sewers? Number 4, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, The White Temple. The Amala Network dungeons throw the gauntlet at you. There's lots of them, and you keep on having to come back here. At one point while lost in this network, you have to traverse 3 temples, and the one that still gives me nightmares to this day is the White Temple. While it's relatively short in comparison to the other dungeons that I've discussed here, and there aren't any pitfalls or invisible walls like in some other network dungeons, it still has its own sadistic puzzles that you have to endure. Every single time that you enter a door, you're teleported to another room. Oftentimes, you'll be teleported to a different room depending on which direction you enter the same door from. Finding your way through here is like going through the Castle of Ordeals on steroids. Just when you think that you're making progress, you enter through a door only to be teleported back to the beginning. Your only hope of getting through here is making your own map where you sporadically teleport through every door. Number 3, Rogue Galaxy Gladius Towers. Please notice the plural here. Then remember that we're talking about Rogue Galaxy, a game already known for having huge, boring dungeons that are basically endless copy-pasted bits of corridors. I can only imagine the Gladius Towers are the result of one developer saying, "Hey guys, I have an idea. Let's make the longest, most copy-pasted dungeon possible, then let's make a second one, and somehow force the player to go through both of them just before getting to the boss. How cool is that?" Then a second developer must have said, "Hey, just one boss. Why don't we have one for each tower? Just look at the map of this place. These interwoven towers are enough to drive anyone crazy." Number 2, Legaia 2, Dual Saga, The Sewers. I remember hearing a story about how in the Middle Ages, when they wanted a child to remember something, that they would beat them as they relayed the message because your mind remembers traumatic experiences. That's kinda how I feel about this game. I don't remember much except for the trauma of the sewers. Take your normal, average, everyday sewer dungeon and add in finding colored keys that correspond to colored doors and switches that raise and lower the water levels. Pepper in plenty of backtracking over bridges at an extreme encounter rate. And to make matters worse, out of your 3 party members, one can't even attack and is completely and utterly useless, dragging out the battles needlessly. Speaking of long drawn-out battles, so many monsters here are resistant to physical attacks or can't be hit by arts because they're flying. Tedious doesn't even begin to describe this place. And now, for the absolute worst PlayStation 2 dungeon. Number 1, Final Fantasy XII, Great Crystal. Imagine a dungeon where every single room looks exactly the same, filled to the brim with tough enemies, invisible platforms, and teleport crystals. Then to make it even more unbearable, take away the in-game map. There's not even an in-game compass to help you along. One wrong turn in this place and you'll be hopelessly lost and completely screwed. Let's add to the fact that there are switches to press to unlock gates, which pretty much guarantees they're going to get turned around and lost. In every single other area of the game you have a map, and for a game known for its huge labyrinthine dungeons, this is a godsend. However, for the absolute worst dungeon in the game, they don't provide you with one. It's inexcusable. To add to the fun, you have to keep coming back here for a myriad of things like getting espers, completing hunts, or finding one-time treasures and fighting super bosses. Let's not forget that to even get to the Great Crystal, you have to pass through another dungeon. The whole place is an anxiety-inducing chore. Well, that's it for the top 10, but I do want to throw out a couple honorable mentions too. Dot Hack Quarantine, Omega Hidden Darkside Holy Ground, Persona 3 Tartarus, and Wild Arms 3 Nightmare Castle. Also, a great thank you to everyone who contributed and commented on what they believed were the worst dungeons of this era. I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and what are your worst dungeons of the PlayStation 2 era? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments, and as always, have a good day.